Okay. I'm going to start recording. Okay, I'm going to give people another minute and then we're going to get started so that we can, I see people are slowly coming on. So we will get started in a minute so that we can get through everything and then everyone can go enjoy the rest of their evening. Okay, we're going to get started. So thank you everybody for joining tonight's webinar. This month of May really focuses on mental health and mental wellness, which is a very, very important topic. I think I've reiterated this a few times, but it's a very important topic, and especially since the onset of the pandemic. Mental health has definitely been affected for many, many people, and our moderator for tonight can definitely speak more to that, and I'll introduce her in a few minutes. But I really am excited for this conversation because I think that nutrition plays a very large role as it pertains to mental health and just self-care. There's a lot of things that we can do for ourselves nutritionally to, better our mental health and just feel better, healthier and happier just from nutrition alone. So I'm really excited about tonight's conversation. So tonight we're going to talk about the different types of self-care. And this is, I think almost the largest part of the conversation, just because there is so much that falls under self-care. What is self-care? What can it look like? It looks very different for everybody. So nutrition, kind of how does that fall under this umbrella of self-care? Some recipes, which I always like to talk about, and obviously we show our resources at the end. So just a little bit about Fair Meals for anybody who's new. We are a free online platform offering families healthy, simple, and affordable meal solutions. We are a 501c3 status nonprofit. We focus primarily on programming. We partner with different organizations, provide nutrition programming through these organizations, and anything that falls under, nutrition. So our mission is to empower families with the nutrition education, step-by-step recipes, and budget planning to make meals healthy, easy, and affordable. Those are the three umbrellas of Fair Meals. So everything we really do and preach falls under those three umbrellas. Our vision is to combat America's chronic disease crisis by making healthy food an option for every family. There really is a horrible chronic disease crisis, and there's a terrible crisis of obesity, and that crisis is really coming into the younger populations, and it's really, really It's disheartening, and it's something that is generally avoidable. And a lot of that comes from nutrition education, and that's really what we're here to help. So a little bit about me. So my name is Ariel Kestenbaum. I founded Fair Meals to offer nutritional guidance and easy recipes that empower families to eat well on a budget. I received my Master's of Science in Nutrition from NYU, and I'm a recognized registered dietitian. I'm also a mom and I'm a wife, and I know how difficult it can be to provide healthy meals for my family that are also convenient and affordable. So with this resource, I really do hope to help, families of all walks of life. And then our moderator for today, which I'm really excited about, Dr. Shonda Reynolds, is a licensed clinical psychologist, content creator, podcast host, national speaker, and emerging voice in the mental health community. She obtained her doctorate degree in clinical psychology after realizing the health disparities within the Black church. Her areas of interest include the impact of transgenerational trauma on the Black community, the integration of faith and mental health within the Black church. Dr. Reynolds recently opened a private practice in Washington, D.C., where she serves various populations. She's the clinical director and CEO of Minds of the Culture, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing mental health access and resources to individuals in the Black community. So Dr. Shonda really plays a very, very important role, in her community, and especially, specifically in the mental health space, which is super, super important. So we're so happy to have you here tonight with us. So please feel free to introduce yourself, anything else you want to say or share before we get started.
Yeah. So firstly, Ariel, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I think this is going to be a very important conversation because a lot of people just aren't aware of how our nutrition and our food choices can impact our emotional and mental state. So I'm excited to hop into this discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, and we're so happy to have you here and your expertise to to join in on this conversation. So we're going to start with types of self-care, and I'm sure that you're going to have a lot to say about this. I'm really excited to hear, any anecdotes that you have, both personally and professionally. So feel free to really chime in whenever. Also, just for our participants and our viewers, I just wanted to remind anyone who has been here before, if anyone's new, feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and Dr. Chanda will be looking for those questions during the presentation. So feel free to ask as we proceed with the presentation. So types of self-care. So an introduction to the different ways that we take care of ourselves. So what is self-care? And self-care can really look different for everybody. There's, I think, so many different ways that self-care can be defined, but I'm going to define this as generally as possible. So it's about taking care of yourself, your mind, and your soul. So while this seems like a simple concept, it's very hard for people to actually implement this into their lives. And I think it's because so many people are just so busy with their day-to-day lives, and they really don't have the time to stop and implement self-care. So what can we do? Because really so many people are just so busy in their day-to-day lives. So what can we do to just implement a little bit of this self-care routine into our daily busy lives? So it does not have to be complicated or expensive. I think so many people think of self-care and they think of going to get a massage or something like that, which, we're taking a lot of time out of our day. It's expensive. It can be complicated to fit into our schedules, but it doesn't have to be, that. It doesn't have to be something along those lines. It can and will look different for different people. And there are multiple types of self-care. So the first thing we're going to talk about is recreational self-care. So recreational self-care is probably what you first think of when hearing the term self-care, right? Which is what we just spoke about. This involves taking time to engage in our favorite hobby or our favorite activity. So what are some examples of what this will look like? So watching a TV show or a movie, I know that is definitely my number one self-care is to sit back on my couch or in my bed and put the TV on. After a long day or a long week, there's really nothing else that makes me happier than sitting down and watching TV. And I really don't get so many hours a week of this. So, the little bit of time that I do get is definitely enjoyable. So that is for sure. I'm guilty, but that is for sure what self-care looks like for me. Taking a bath or having a spa day. I know plenty of people who just really can relax when they're in a bath, right? It's a very, very relaxing thing to them. And then some people really don't have patience for a bath, or a bath makes them really hot, or it's just not enjoyable for them. So it's a really, for some people, that's just not what it looks like. But I do know many people that's definitely an idea of self-care. Going shopping, right? Even though that can seem like not the same as watching TV or taking a bath or having a spa day, just going shopping, kind of like clearing our minds, that just makes some people really, really happy. And they call it, I guess, retail therapy. And I don't know if that's real or not, Dr. Shanda, if you want to talk more about that, but I think some people really do feel this as, some sort of therapy for themselves, or just something to make them feel good.
Yeah, so that's actually a great point. So I always tell my clients that if you're in an emotional state, it's probably best not to make decisions to make large purchases and spend money and such. But if we're going just a window shop because, I like to go to the Louis stores and the boutiques down the street, that's totally fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. I never really thought about that, but it's true, right? Making any large decision and saying, you know what, I'm having a really bad day. I'm going to go spend, X amount of money, which is a really crazy amount of money. And that can, look different for different people. Probably not the best thing to do when we're having a day. So very good point. And I will keep that in mind. So mental self-care. So mental self-care involves stimulating cognitive thinking to support brain health. So what can this look like? So limiting screen time, which is very, very difficult for our generations and down. Screen time, the amount of screen time is pretty incredible. And a lot of us don't really have a choice, right? A lot of us sit in front of screens all day for work. It's not even because, it's not like when we say screen time for our kids, it's, sitting in front of a TV and watching, TV shows or movies, but it's what we do for work. We need to sit in front of the TV all day. We need to constantly be by our phones, right? There's so many people that have 3 phones for work, and, they're constantly people need to be able to reach them at all times. And it's definitely not helping, I think, the mental health crisis that's going on. And that's just my personal opinion. Of course, I have no professional opinion here, but I think personally, it's just the feeling of always needing to be reachable, I think, causes a lot of anxiety and stress.
No, just to piggyback off of what you're saying though, Ariel, when people are scrolling more often, it does, there are studies that suggest that there's a higher correlation of anxiety and depressive symptoms. So you're absolutely right. That's one of the reasons why we should take time away from social media and excessive scrolling, because it can be detrimental to our mental health.
Yeah. And it's really hard. It's a lot easier said than done. But, even something I like to do, and I'll just give a personal thing, is, at night, when I'm if I have time to, watch TV or whatever, I put my phone in the charger, and I really try not to look at it until the morning, and it's I can get into my bed at 8:30, and then you may not be able to reach me at 8:30 anymore. Sometimes I'm asleep, and sometimes I'm not. I'm just not by my phone because I'm watching TV, and I know TV's also screen time, but for me, it's very different screen time than than scrolling through my phone and looking at emails and even social media. So, okay. Yes. Solving a puzzle or playing chess. I know even just with the like the elder population, for example, right? They're always saying to do crossword puzzles or, play games like chess, that they're really they're using their brain a little bit more. So I think that that's, a good example of that. But even for our generation, right? Doing like a crossword puzzle or a regular puzzle, right? I know so many people who love puzzles because they love like that mental challenge and they like thrive off of that mental challenge. And I think that that's almost like a mental self-care type of thing. And then reading a book or an article. Reading a book or an article is also a great way to practice this mental self-care. And sometimes I think when people are going through, either difficult times or they're having difficult days, it may be really difficult to pay attention to a book. I know that that's something that I deal with. Like I find I can't pay attention to a book when, I'm had a difficult day and I find myself just rereading the same paragraph over and over again. And some people that it really kind of takes them out of, that space or that bad place, and it brings them into, they're so immersed in that book. And I think that's really great. But just, it's important to know, I think, what type of person you are.
Absolutely. And just to highlight this comment that we have, Deborah said that's a good point, because years ago, one didn't have all of this to keep us occupied. It's smart to take a breather. And I 100% agree with that.
I totally agree. It's very true. And I think that the generation, I think before my generation, like it's easier for them to do that because they didn't grow up with screens. And even me, I mean, I didn't, cell phones and things like that were not really part of my childhood. As I got older, it definitely started to ramp up. But I'm kind of like in that generation of like, we didn't grow up with it, but we also did kind of grow up with it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's difficult. But then I think about my kids' generation who like grow up with iPads and phones, like just in their face all the time, even if it's not their phones or their iPads, but like, it's just so like, they know how to, my kids know how to like use YouTube and scroll my pictures. Like it's pretty crazy, but they're just it's so part of their day-to-day lives. But I do agree with that comment of like, years ago, this was not accessible and this is not what people did to keep busy. So we have to remind ourselves that, and taking a break is definitely important. Emotional self-care. So that involves strengthening our emotional intelligence, learning how to process our feelings and emotions, which I think is definitely one of those things that are easier said than done. And it may not even be easier said than done. It may be very, very difficult. So what does emotional self-care look like? So setting boundaries at work or with others. And I think setting boundaries at work is very, very difficult. And that's an example of something that is for sure is easier said than done. I know that for some people, they say like, oh, I want to stop working at 6 p.m. But then, we have our phones on, right? So an email comes, oh, I'm just going to go answer this one email. While they're answering that one email, another, a few more emails come in, and before you know it, it's 11 p.m. and you've been working all night. And I think it's really, really difficult, especially for people who do have bosses, right? And have people that are, kind of like constantly sending work to them, and they have people to report to, and they almost feel like it's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. So it's really easy to say, yeah, I want to set this boundary, but then you're also, on the other hand, you're reporting to someone and you want to perform, to the best of your ability. So I think that's a very, very difficult boundary to set. Writing positive affirmations. I've personally never done this, but it sounds like this can be very, very helpful to people. Do you use that in your practice at all, or
so what's Yeah, this is actually something that I encourage my clients to engage in, simply because not only can it be really reinforcing to write positive affirmations about ourselves, but also from a neurological perspective, the more we're able to just write down things and rehearse them in our heads about ourselves, the more we actually start to believe it. Like it's ingrained into like the neurological pathways. So I'm a firm believer in writing positive affirmations and talking about them out loud. So I love that one. Even kind of going back to your point about setting boundaries at work and with others, that one is so important because that's what gets people to my office in the first place, if I'm being honest.
I'm sure. I am sure.
Yes, and not being able to set those boundaries can definitely impact one's mental health. And we've seen that pattern and trend on like quiet quitting and such. So that's one of the reasons why that leads to that. So I'm glad you.
Yeah, quiet quitting is like the new term now. But it's true. It's really hard. I'm sure you do see a lot of people who, they're self-acclaimed, workaholics or whatever it is, but it's true. It's really, really hard. I think it's really hard for so many people to set those boundaries, but it is really important. So for those of you who are, listening today, just, maybe keep that in mind. And keep in mind what Dr. Chanda said. And then, attending therapy sessions. I am personally a big believer that everybody should be attending therapy sessions. I really believe that having somebody who has zero bias and who is really, trained to sit and listen and provide, advice or help or whatever it is just like the best way to provide ourselves emotional self-care. And I'm sure that you believe that too, but from somebody who's, doesn't do that professionally, I very much believe that that's, a very important thing and something that, everybody or most people really should look into.
Yeah, because the reality is we all experience stress, and having someone to talk to about it can make it that much more manageable.
100%. Okay, environmental self-care. So your environment at home or work can have a profound effect on your productivity and your mood. So making your bed every morning. So I know for me, like if my bed's not made, it feels messy and I feel annoyed and like, on edge. It's really nice to have a made bed. It kind of, even just walking into your room for a few minutes to get something or do something, it can definitely just like make things feel neater and just take away some of that agitation, for me at least. Decluttering and organizing, again, I think that's the same idea as, making your bed every morning, and listening to relaxing music, just allowing the environment to feel a little bit more relaxing. I think when you go to a spa, right, it's not quiet. There's always some sort of like background. You can call it elevator music or spa music, something that's very relaxing to just kind of set the tone and set the mood. And a lot of times we don't even realize that it's there, which I think is almost the best part because we're so not aware of it. It's just, but it's helping to create that environment.
For sure. Even if I can go back to
the sure.
Making your bed and decluttering, just from a personal level, I am a lot less productive if I'm cluttered and things are everywhere. So I definitely relate to that one.
I completely agree. I can't say I'm always the best at decluttering and organizing, but I definitely feel a lot better and more productive when things are decluttered and organized. So I'm going to try to work really hard on that one because I know that it is helpful for me. Spiritual self-care. So spiritual self-care is aimed at finding inner peace, unlocking your purpose, why am I here, and nourishing the soul. So attending a religious service, right? Just feeling uplifted just religiously. Meditating or practicing mindfulness. And actually, I heard, I was listening to something today that spoke a lot about mindfulness, and somebody kind of asked the question, what is mindfulness? And it's really, it it does, and it should look different for every single person. So I think so many people view, you know, mindfulness and like meditation as sitting like cross-legged with your hands up and your eyes closed, and doing it like that. And that just may not work for everybody, right? Sometimes, you know, and giving like 30 minutes to doing that. But for some people, so in this picture, that's exactly what that's portraying. But for some people, it's just kind of like focusing on an object and like kind of ignoring everything else in the room. And somebody said that today, and I was like, that's like a really good point. That's probably something that like I can do probably more than sitting, you know, with my eyes closed and whatever. Some people, again, it's going back to that environment and putting on that peaceful music and just like focusing on breath work, and things like that. And there's some times where I'm like, I'm having a really stressful day. I know for me, and like just like taking a couple of deep breaths is so, so helpful. And even just taking 2 minutes to do that and really focusing on breath work, can be really, really helpful, in terms of like just spiritual self-care.
For sure. I 100% agree with that. And also, I love the fact that you highlighted that meditation and mindfulness can look different for everyone. Like we don't have to just try to sit there and empty our minds, because me personally, like I'm a visual person. So it's impossible for me to empty my mind.
100%. Like, and I agree. Sometimes when I'm sitting there and closing my eyes, I used to use like one of those apps, and I'm sitting there closing my eyes and I'm just like focusing on literally everything that I shouldn't be focusing on. Like I'm sitting there and I'm like focusing on everything I have to do later and my whole like list of things to do. And like, why didn't I do this? And oh my God, I should be doing this instead of what I'm doing right now. And then it's like totally not defeats the whole purpose of the exercise. So I think it really is important to note that it really can, and it should look different for everybody, because everyone has their different anxiety levels and stress levels, and things of that sort. So physical self-care. So physical self-care involves habits that serve as the foundation of longevity and disease prevention. So eating a healthy meal, and this is where you're going to see, like, this is that final part, and we're going to get into the nutrition part of it, in a few minutes. But eating a healthy meal, right? Exercising regularly. Exercising is so important, for our minds and for just, I think, mental health in general. And I see it for myself too, as somebody who's gotten much more into a routine of, you know, exercising regularly. I find the days that I don't exercise regularly, or the days that I don't exercise, or if I go on like a little bit of like a longer break, I definitely see that it affects my, you know, my general day-to-day mental health. So super, super important to get ourselves into a routine if we can. And again, exercise can look different for everybody, you know, depending on your physical abilities and everything of that sort, right? For people who are older or maybe have certain disabilities, they can do chair exercises, which are great as well, can be very, very helpful for our mental status, for our mental health, too. So it doesn't have to be, you know, crazy HIIT type exercises or CrossFit or, you know, cardio. It can really look different for everybody. Yoga is included in this. And I think yoga kind of would fall under both physical and that, like going back to that mindfulness.
Absolutely. And we do have a question about exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Asking if there are any recommendations on the exercise for different age groups.
I think that pretty much it's not so much definitely for the older population, there's a lot of focus on weight bearing exercises just because there is a lot more muscle wasting in that population. But that's a lot of the time just because generally there's a little bit more of a sedentary lifestyle. But I think it's not as much about the age as it is your physical ability and your ability to go out there and exercise. So if you're, you know, able to go out and, you know, and do pretty much everything, then, you know, they say like 120 minutes a week of, you know, like moderate to an intense type of exercise. So we want to do and or like an aerobic type of exercise, right? So cardio is really great. We definitely want to get cardio in a few times a week. That can also include like 30 minutes or more of walking a day, but walking not at a slow pace, at, a nice steady pace. And then we can also, also do, and then that's like includes also things like spinning, going on a treadmill, doing some sort of dance cardio. And then there's also, Pilates, which is a little bit more low impact, but still like a really great exercise, something that we can also do as we continue to, get a little bit older and maybe, do a little bit less cardio and a little bit more of a Pilates or bar type of exercise. So I think it's not as much about an age as it is your ability to go out and exercise. And getting enough sleep is definitely going to be important. We really want to try to get 8 hours a night of sleep. I know a lot of people think it's 7 hours, but it's really 8 hours. We want to make sure we're trying to get 8 hours. 7 hours can work for some nights, but we don't want to get 7 hours every night. We really want to try to get 8 if we can. And I know for some people it's very difficult, but we should just try. That should be our goal. So now nutrition. So now we're going to dive deeper into nutrition as a form of self-care. So optimizing our health. So all other types of self-care depend on first taking care of our bodies through food. Neglecting the importance of nutrition will increase your risk for chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, and like a whole myriad of other conditions. So we really want to optimize our health. So what is a healthy diet? So fueling properly and regularly provides us with the energy that we need to function physically during exercise and just regular day-to-day activities. Symptoms of mental health like fatigue and depression are greatly impacted by nutrition as well. And I actually heard a really, really interesting, I've been sharing this a lot lately, but I was really fascinated by it. I was at a lecture about 2 weeks ago where there was a doctor who spoke about the gut microbiome. And she, that's her area of expertise. And she spoke about how 80% of our serotonin, which is responsible, and I'm sure you know this, Dr. Chanda, but about 80% of our serotonin is found in our gut microbiome, which is the hormone that's responsible for, depression and anxiety and everything that goes on up there. So making sure that we, keep our gut microbiome healthy, and, providing it with the proper nutrients, is, like probiotics and prebiotics, and just making sure it stays healthy, is very, very helpful to keep those serotonin levels lower, and to, hopefully lessen the amount of depression and anxiety that we're feeling.
That's such a great point. And that reminds me of, I was also at a talk where it was their expertise in gut health, and they referred to the gut as the second brain, which really helps put things into perspective for a lot of people, because we think that only the brain and the neurotransmitters in the brain impacts health, when in actuality, the gut does as well. So that's such a great point.
Yeah. And so there's so much that I think it's like kind of there's so much literature that's coming out about it now. And I think the gut microbiome has definitely been popular for a few years, but I think so much of this correlation between our gut and our brain is like, there's so much just research coming out really every day, for the most part. And just there's such a connection between the two. And obviously keeping our gut microbiome healthy is the first thing to think about, is, following a healthy diet. So I was really interested to hear that. And I was really excited to bring that up at our during this webinar, because I think it's such an interesting point. So nutrition as self-care may look like preparing a home-cooked meal. So there's the act of, preparing the home-cooked meal. And then there's just, anything for the most part that we're making at home is going to be healthier than what we're getting from a restaurant. And that's just because we know what's going in there. We know the amount that's going in there. We can go to a restaurant that's going to say, oh, we're, so healthy, but they're using, half a bottle of oil and, different ingredients that just may not be as healthy for us. So, definitely home cooked meal is going to be a better option for us. Limiting intake of processed foods. So this is kind of like, I'm going to go back to that gut microbiome. Processed foods can be pretty detrimental to our gut. And so, of course, every so often we can have processed food, and I'm never going to tell somebody to completely restrict it from their diet, but we definitely want to limit it. We want to focus generally on whole foods, and that, will be very helpful for keeping our gut healthy. And eating lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, I'm going to add to that. And just all of these are considered whole foods. And this is just going to be very, very important for, in terms of nutrition as self-care. So nutrition and moderation. So this is a topic I really like to talk about, because I think I speak so much about, eating a healthy diet and what that looks like, and, focusing on whole foods and everything like that. But then there's the other side of, just enjoying ourselves, right? And nutrition and moderation. And part of self-care is eating the food that we love. And it may not always be considered the healthiest or the most nutrient dense option, but it's just really enjoyable to us. And we should not depriving ourselves and completely restricting these foods will almost definitely affect our mental health, right? There's just sometimes that there are certain foods that are just feel good foods for us, and they really, really uplift us and uplift our mood. So remember, it's more beneficial to eat these types of food in moderation than eliminate them completely. So you see in the pictures here, someone eating a cupcake, or you see someone at the movie theater getting popcorn. And, if you're going to go to a movie, I go to a movie maybe twice a year. It's probably been even less now since COVID. But, when I go to a movie, I'm going to go get popcorn because I love movie theater popcorn. And to me, seeing a movie in a movie theater is just not as enjoyable unless there's popcorn. Again, if I'm going every day or, a few times a week to a movie, I probably won't get it every single day. But if I go once or twice a year, I'm going to get that movie theater popcorn because it's so enjoyable for me. And it's just, the experience is just not the same. And it's it's just totally uplifts that experience. So I think it's a really important thing for everybody to really know that we need to be able to indulge in the foods that we love. And it shouldn't be every day, but it should definitely happen. And we should be able to enjoy the foods that we love, because why else are we living?
It sounds like you're saying to give ourselves the permission to experience the pleasure in food intake.
100%. And I really don't know any dietitian that would tell you otherwise, that would say completely restrict this food. Obviously, if you have a food allergy, or you're, completely, you're severely, celiac, or, have real issues with, with gluten or something, dairy, something like that, and you're just going to have major discomfort after, probably not worth it. But if it's just because, you're worried about eating it too much, and you're nervous to eat it, eating a cupcake once in a while is not doing anything to us in terms of weight and even our gut and everything like that. And we should be able to enjoy these pleasures.
I'm enjoying hearing that. I'm just planning what I'm about to eat.
Yes. Yes, I know. So what does nutrition and self-care also look like? So eating ice cream with friends. And I think that there's a really, really big social aspect to eating. And you see here, eating ice cream with friends. So sometimes you'll go to dinner, right, for a friend's birthday, and there'll be one friend who's, sitting there and not eating. So for both parties, it can be pretty uncomfortable, right? Because you're sitting there, your whole group of friends, and you're all eating, and you're eating cake, and you're eating, whatever it is at the pasta and pizza. And then there's this one friend who's not really eating anything. And it's, it's kind of uncomfortable, I think, for everybody else. And then it's probably more uncomfortable for that person because it actually causes a lot of anxiety and stress for that person to go to a meal, because it's obviously sometimes it's out of their control, but the anxiety that they probably feel beforehand about, going to this meal and, sitting there and knowing that there's going to be all these food there, it can allow, it can cause a lot of anxiety, and you'll find that there may be friends of yours or, family members or whatever it is who may actually opt out of, socializing when you're sitting, when you're going to a restaurant or you're going for ice cream or something like that, because it's just an uncomfortable experience for them. And again, sometimes most of the time it's really out of their control. So there is it can almost cause like them to become, almost antisocial, right? And just really miss out on certain events or, certain moments, because there is so much anxiety around this, type of activity.
Yeah.
Do you like find like you see people like that?
Yeah. So what we're talking about is that communal aspect of eating. And because it is such a communal thing for a lot of us in specific, like, cultures or even like within families, sometimes it does become overwhelming for people who experience social sort of anxieties to eat in groups. So that's definitely something that I tend to see at the practice.
Yeah. And it's actually real. It is very sad for them, because I think that it's, like I said, and you probably know better, like really out of their control. But it's hard. It's a very hard balance. And you just mentioned this before, the holidays, enjoying all foods around the holidays, right? There's so many, I think, whether you're religious or not, there's so many holidays that just revolve around food and eating and being with your family and just like all the delicious food. And it's kind of that same thing as being with friends, but like being with your family or friends or whatever it is. The holidays can become a very stressful time. And I think holidays in general, I know, like, Christmas time can be, triggering for some people who maybe like, lost family members or not as close with their family or whatever it is. So there's some of those triggers, but there's also these triggers around just like all the food that's going to be. It's like Thanksgiving, and that goes right into Christmas. And if you're, celebrate Kwanzaa or you celebrate Hanukkah or any of these holidays, there's so much food. It revolves so much around food, and it can be a very, very stressful and anxiety provoking time. So, just making sure that we can get over that anxiety and be able to enjoy with our friends and our families and enjoy all the food around holiday time. And abstaining from diet foods. So I don't want to say like I'm talking about fad diets here, right? For people, people people want weight loss, and should follow, a lifestyle that allows for weight loss, right? But following crazy fad diets, right, where we're just a liquid diet, or doing Whole30, or, if it makes you feel good, fine. If you're doing it properly, fine. But they are pretty restrictive, and they're usually not very sustainable. So if you find that there's a diet that's really not sustainable and we're not able to kind of live a life following this diet, it's usually probably not such a good idea, and probably will end up affecting our mental health in some way or another. Okay, so micronutrient or macronutrients as the foundation. So I speak a lot about the macronutrients, which are fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So we want to focus on healthy fats, so enhance brain function to support mental well-being. We want to focus on whole grains, so provide energy for exercise, which improves heart health. So these are going to be our complex carbohydrates. And then lean protein, which promote muscle growth and maintain bone density. So lean protein is going to look like things like, white meat chicken, white meat poultry, fish, beans are a lean protein, things like that. Those are things that we want to focus on more. So what we eat has a profound impact on our mental health. So prioritizing the whole nutrient-dense food in our diet to support short-term and long-term mental health. Highly processed foods are not as beneficial and should be eaten in moderation. So you're seeing here somebody's kind of looking at, the apple versus the donut. And I think that there's a lot that we can think about when we look in this picture, right? And you can't really say, oh, well, apple's the smart choice. I think it really depends, right? If it's this person hasn't had a donut in 6 months and they want that donut and they're like, oh, but I really should be having an apple, they should have that donut. They should enjoy that donut. But if this person, is really like, I have donuts pretty often, and what should I have in this case? And they're kind of weighing those two options. Then we do want to prioritize, the apple, because that's a whole food and it's a not processed food and there's no, added sugar and everything like that.
I love how you're highlighting the different scenarios and how it can look different for everybody.
Exactly. It's true. And I when I put that picture and I thought about that, because I was like, everybody's situation is different, right? And we can't say, yep, always go for the apple, because yes, in most cases we probably should. But in some cases it's just, someone's having a really bad day and they just haven't had a donut and that's a comfort food for them. And, go for that. So definitely really can look different for everybody. And I think that just kind of goes back to the point of mental health looking different for everybody, and everybody's mental health status is so different from one another, and we really can't judge because nobody really knows what's going on inside anybody else's head. Foods for brain health. So dark chocolate. So when I say dark chocolate, I'm saying like real cocoa, dark chocolate. Not Hershey's dark chocolate, real dark chocolate. It's rich in magnesium, and that's a mineral that can help reduce stress. Green tea, it's high, I think, besides for the fact that it's high in antioxidants, which, in this L-theanine, which can help improve mood. I think just tea in general is a very, very comforting beverage. I think that some people, I personally am not a tea person or a tea lover, but for people who are like, before bed, maybe not green tea because of that caffeine, but some kind of herbal tea before bed at the end of the day can just really cause and create that like relaxing environment that we spoke about in the beginning. So green tea, can be helpful because of these antioxidants and just improving mood in generally. But I think going back to setting that environment and setting that, I guess, peaceful environment, having something like after dinner or before bed to kind of like calm down and end the day on like this nice note. Tea is definitely a very, very popular choice for some people. Sunflower seeds, they contain vitamin A, which can also help, or is said to be correlated in lowering the stress hormone cortisol, which is what we spoke about before when I mentioned that there's, this 80% of the cortisol is found in our gut. Some more foods for brain health. So chickpeas or garbanzo beans, they're rich in zinc, and that's a mineral that promotes brain health. Avocados, so besides for being a healthy fat, which is important for brain development and just general brain health, it's also high in B vitamins for sustaining energy levels. And blueberries contain an antioxidant, which can help also with symptoms of anxiety. So we spoke a little bit about the gut-brain connection. I actually forgot that it was in here. We can speak more, Dr. Shonda, if you have anything to add to, what you were saying before and what you heard, but studies show a strong correlation, which we said before, between gut health and brain health. And when we support our gut, our mental health follows. So we have these two things called probiotics and prebiotics. So probiotics are these healthy bacteria that's in our stomach. So we have healthy and non-healthy bacteria, and we want to kind of create a balance between the two. We don't want the bad bacteria to be more than the good bacteria. We want there to be a nice influx of good bacteria. So that's these probiotics. So things like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, obviously supplements, things like that. And then prebiotics are what actually the probiotics feed of. So there's feed from. So the prebiotics are like kind of like that food, the food for the probiotics for these healthy bacteria. So things like soluble fiber, so oats, peas, beans, garlic, onions, green bananas. I say green bananas because that's where we get the soluble fiber. So for example, somebody who's constipated, and this is totally not related, having a green, not ripe banana is going to be very, very helpful. As opposed to when they are ripe and yellow, it actually will give us the opposite effect. So, so just an interesting thing to note. But these are all, the prebiotics are very, very important. It's important that we have both probiotics and prebiotics. And of course, there are supplements of those as well.
Yeah, highlighting the gut brain connection is so important because like I said before, a lot of people just aren't aware of that significant correlation between what we eat and how we feel. Because if we eat better, it sounds like the research is telling us that we feel better, which is why it's so important to, of course, eat those foods in moderation that you like, but also keeping in mind the foods that are important for that gut health that we're discussing.
Yes, exactly. The truth behind diets and skin care. So self-care is a profitable business. Many products and services that are marketed as self-care can actually be expensive and unnecessary. The body has its own detoxification process that thrives with proper nutrition. So we hear all the time, right? Like, we're going to go detox and, detox our skin, and that's going to take all these toxins out. And there's a whole process that our body goes through. Our body is very, very smart. And we're born that way. And so we have to trust that process, and just providing it with healthy and proper nutrition will allow that detoxification process to work and to thrive.
I was going to say it's important to continue to bust that myth about self-care being super expensive, because oftentimes when we talk about self-care, people assume that it's, manis, pedis,
facials,
right,
massages,
exactly.
Which are great.
Yeah.
But we don't always have the ability to do that. And some people need some sort of self-care almost daily, and there's just not enough time, and it's very expensive to do that. So, all the things that we spoke about in the past, 50 minutes can really, those all serve as, different types of self-care. So, and it's important to know that's kind of really what the point of tonight's lecture was, is to let people know and speak about the affordability and obviously the nutrition component to self-care.
Absolutely.
So foods for skin and liver health. So we have broccoli, which is a cruciferous vegetable that contains fiber. It also contains calcium. So for people who don't have dairy and aren't getting enough milk or yogurt, broccoli is also a very good source of calcium. But that's a side point. But the fiber is important because it helps support the liver. So again, it can help, promote that detoxification process, which does happen in the liver. Lemons, so high in vitamin C, which has anti-aging properties. It can be very, very good for our skin as well. And beets activate liver enzymes to aid in this natural detoxification. Beets are very, very good for our liver, and also for our skin actually as well, but very important when we talk about detoxification. And then I always like to end off with recipes. So what are some realistic meals and affordable recipes to promote self-care? So, we want to focus on a balanced breakfast. So yogurt bowls, right? So using some plain yogurt or Greek yogurt with some granola, maybe best if it's homemade, so we know there's not too much added sugar in there, and then some fruit, some honey, things like that. Protein pancakes, right? We can easily make our own high protein pancakes. We can add flaxseed in there. We can add omega-3 fatty acid in there. by adding chia seeds and things like that, which also gives a little bit of protein. So there's a lot of things that we can do, to make things delicious, but also add some protein in there and add some good nutrients. Eggs, right? Adding in a ton of vegetables, making a little bit more nutrient dense, adding cheese to add more protein and calcium and other nutrients. So these are all really good examples of balanced breakfasts. So on the go lunches, so chicken with, salad with chicken or any other type of protein, a turkey sandwich, a salmon bowl, right? If we're doing a rice bowl, we can do, fish, salmon, tofu, whatever it is. But just adding, again, a whole slew of healthy macronutrients.
I love how you have the on the go part, because a lot of us are on the go. So, and that's what contributes to a lot of our poor food decisions that we make.
100%. Because people are like, oh, I'm just going to run in and grab, this from the bodega or this from, wherever it is. And not only is it, we could be making poor nutrition choices, but so many times these places, I'm in New York and like you see it for sure in New York, these lunch places, they're so expensive and people it's unaffordable to every day go out and, grab a lunch and, maybe taking a few extra minutes from the night before or setting aside some leftover dinner can really just, help stretch your dollar and help, things become a little bit more affordable for these on the go lunches. Family dinner, so pasta and meatballs. I'm always a fan of, throwing in some extra vegetables and meatballs. And I don't like to say, let's hide things. I know, there's all these cookbooks of like trying to hide vegetables and meatballs and getting your kids to eat it. I really believe in letting your kids know that there's vegetables in there and letting, anybody know that there's vegetables in there. I don't like to hide anything, but just making things more nutrient dense, adding vegetables is super, super important, helpful, and can help with these balanced meals. Grilled fish with some veggies and a stir fry. I love stir fry because you're getting, the proteins. You can do chicken, you can do a lean beef, you can even do it with tofu, and then you're adding tons of vegetables and all these flavors and adding, using all these flavor profiles. It's so delicious and super, super healthy. And again, a really great way to then use leftovers for the next day if you need for lunch, because it stays really, really nicely. And then this is the one real recipe we have. This is a teriyaki chicken, rice, and broccoli bowl. And I really love this recipe because it's super, super easy. It uses all affordable ingredients. We're using some chicken breast. We're using, white or brown rice, whatever you prefer. Frozen broccoli, frozen vegetables are something that people tend to think are not as healthy as fresh, but they actually are. We freeze vegetables at peak ripeness. So we get all of those nutrients in there, or most of them for that matter. And then we're using things like soy sauce, honey, apple cider vinegar, which is very, very a great, first of all, flavor wise, it's great. It's also, a good for our immune system. Garlic, ginger, again, very helpful in terms of immunity and gut health, and sesame oil. And so that's the marinade. We're going to put let our chicken marinate in that for a bit. The frozen broccoli, you can either just let defrost and use as is. I typically like to just roast it for 15 minutes in the oven, some olive oil, salt, and pepper. That's it. Add it to some rice. Super, super easy. You have yourself a really good, balanced, delicious meal. And again, you can utilize these different ingredients in so many different ways. So you can use the chicken, for dinner in this rice bowl, and then the next day use it with a salad and the broccoli as well. And you can really utilize this in so many different ways. And that is really it. That's all we have.
Wow. So I feel motivated to make some chicken bowl or something that'll help with my overall mental health. Yeah, so this was amazing. Thank you for providing us this information.
Thank you, and thanks for being here and for sharing your professional and your personal opinions and feelings, because I think a lot of people can really use you know any and all tips for maximum mental health, I guess mental health wellness.
For sure, for sure. And a lot of us, I think, especially in like where we are in like the Western hemisphere, the go-to that is often pushed is, if you have an issue, then, straight to medication. When in actuality, there are things that we can do in terms of our nutrition to help with our overall mental wellness, which is why your information is just so important.
I totally agree with that. And I think that, medication for sure serves its purpose and has its place. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, but I think that there's so many things that people can practice, ahead of time, and nutrition plays such a large role. And it's important for people to know that. So I think that this was like a really great conversation. I think it was a really great topic. And I'm glad that we had this month, where we're highlighting mental health, and we were able to talk about it. So thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. This was recorded, so it will be up on our website in the next few days. And we'll see you next time.
Awesome. And just so you know, Deborah said this was incredibly informative, and she's thanking us both. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you so much. This was great.
It was so informative.
Hold on, I'm just removing everyone. Hold on. This was so great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Absolutely. And it was so nice to meet you.
It was great meeting you as well. Thank you for having
me. Thank you. Thanks so much. Oh, I'm so recording. Great. We're done.